Welcome back. You're now watching the political segment of the weekend show, and today we will be talking about fuel subsidy removal, repercussions of the federal government's 18-month extension, and the Petroleum Industries Act, and the 2022 budget. Now, the federal government says it is proposing an 18-month extension of the implementation of the fuel subsidy removal policy. This was made known on Tuesday by the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Timipre Sylva, during a special briefing at the State House on fuel subsidies by the Presidential Communications team at the Presidential Villa. Sylva revealed that the government has concluded plans to approach the National Assembly to amend the Petroleum Industry Act. Having this conversation with me today, I have Barrister Onwala Chetam Theory, a legal practitioner and a political activist. Welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here again.
Thank you. And we have a lecturer, a petroleum economist, Ahmed Adamu, Dr. Ahmed Adamu. Welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we'll go straight to it. In November last year, the federal government had stated through the Minister of Finance that by June of 2022, they will stop paying for subsidies. And to cushion the fall, 40 million Nigerians, the poorest of the poor, will be given about 5,000 naira monthly to cushion the removal of fuel subsidies. And in the last 1 week, a lot of Nigerians complained about the timing of removal of fuel subsidies, as we've learned that by June it may not be sustainable. Now the federal government has now taken a U-turn to say we'll give an 18-month extension. What's the implication, and this is for you, Dr. Adamu, what's the implication of removing or keeping the fuel subsidy? What's your take on this back and forth?
Well, now let's talk about keeping the subsidy.
Yes.
We'll be talking about 150 billion naira every month, and that will translate into what kind of infrastructural development and what kind of schools or hospitals you can think of that can make. And then when you look at the arbitrage that the subsidy being provided in Nigeria is creating for people that will buy cheap oil from Nigeria and sell it in neighboring countries at expensive price. And this, if you look at the population growth in Nigeria, the population is continuously growing. And that means tomorrow we're going, instead of having maybe 150 billion, it's going to reach 200 billion or more than that. So the budget is going to be increasing continuously, and that will reduce the government power to do other development projects. And so that is keeping the subsidy, because the subsidy started since Obasanjo regime, the first regime, and then they didn't think of how to remove it.
Sorry.
And taking the steps to removing it. Removing subsidy, it has nothing to do with the month or a day or a year to remove it. It's about certain conditions you have to fulfill before you remove it. So me as a petroleum economist and most other experts also believe that petroleum subsidy is not sustainable, especially when the government has to borrow money to pay for the consumption of petroleum. And when you look at the government involvement in the petroleum sector, the government regulation, it comes with huge costs. So the best thing to do is to remove the government involvement, direct involvement in the sector. But when you remove the subsidy, now, assuming you don't remove it, because the timing is everything when it comes to policies like that, it's not about 18 months. It depends on what you do, what you are going to do within the 18 months before the time reaches or arrive. So I think when you remove the petroleum subsidy, what you're going to have is at the moment when we have the barrel of oil around $90 per barrel, you're going to see the petrol at the filling station around 400 naira per liter. And what you're going to have is the volatility of the pump price, because anytime the crude oil price increases, the liter at the filling station is going to increase. Whenever naira loses value, the price at the pump station is going to increase. So the volatility is going to be very frequent. And Nigerians don't want that. And Nigerians cannot afford 400 naira per liter or far more than that because of so much exposure to the vulnerabilities of our crude oil price and the value of our currency. And then that's going to reduce the purchasing power of people's income. And eventually, I think Nigerians are going to fall into more poverty, and then the inflation is going to go above 20%. So I don't think it's the right time for this administration to remove the petroleum subsidy. If they plan to remove the subsidy from the last 7 years, they should have make the plan to do that and set the environment for them to remove it swiftly. And you cannot just remove subsidy like that once and for all. You have to phase it out through certain strategies. And that's why I recommended what I call the targeted subsidy. You cannot just remove it totally and say you are removing your hand. And giving Nigerians money, cash as palliatives, should never be the option. Because what Nigerians want is to give them the environment for them to work and get far more than 5,000 you plan to give them. And then how many millions of Nigerians are you going to give 5,000 every month to compensate what the petrol subsidy is providing for them at the moment?
I'll come back to you on targeted subsidies, so you could expand on that. But Barrister Theory, whether we like it or not, this is the political segment. And moving this by 18 months, it means passing the buck to the next government. We had this in 2012 with the GEG administration, and there was Occupy Nigeria. There was a whole lot of uproar when they wanted to remove it. I recall in 2011, there's a video where President Buhari clearly said there's no such thing as subsidy and who is paying who, and called it a scam. But now we see the numbers, 150 billion. So in 1 year, that's a good percentage of our budget. However, the Petroleum Industry Act has been signed and passed, which we had that debate for years for a bit of it to even be made into law. Does the federal government now have the right to choose when to remove subsidies and how to? Isn't this in contravention of the Petroleum Industries Act, which has been assented to by the President?
Okay, thank you so much. You know, these issues of subsidy and the PIA has taken this country for over how many years now to resolve and to get to the position where we are today. You know, sometime last year, about August last year, the President assented to the PIA, and lots of Nigerians came up with hopes and believed that at least a section of our problem or a part of our problem has been laid to rest. Unfortunately, this current move by this present administration, it's definitely for some of us who actually have looked at things the way they should be, it's not the best for our country at this particular point. Reason being that you can't just wake up and decide to suspend a legislation. The best you can do is to actually send to the National Assembly for an amendment, which the Minister for Petroleum also did say they were going to do. So coming up to say you're extending the implementation of the PIA on the subsidy removal for 18 months, to me, it's not the best approach. And that was supposed to commence on the 16th of February this year. And when you look at it, it's an illegal action. If you ask me, in my opinion, that act is illegal. However, if they go back to the National Assembly and the National Assembly approves that extension or amends that part of the PIA, then the actions becomes legal. But making a pronouncement alone cannot solve these particular problems. It's like them actually going against the same law which was actually passed by the National Assembly and by Nigerians. And that's not the kind of society we want. This is not a military administration where someone wakes up and makes a decree and the decree stands. The right thing should be done, and it must be done, and that is what Nigerians expect.
And you make some very valid points. I remember on the 1st of January, on the 2nd, the conversation which we had was about the President had signed the 2022 appropriation bill into law as an act. And then we found out, and he stated in his speech that some concerns, for instance, the National Assembly had added about 6,000 projects in the budget. And so he signed that, and the plan is to go back to the National Assembly to amend. Now, this is the same situation which we are seeing with the PIA, where something has been signed into law, then the presidency or the executive changes a decision and decides to go back. Isn't this counteractive? What's the position of Nigerian lawyers and our legal system on this? Because if this is constantly being flaunted, it becomes a precedent which the next set of people can do. So How does this affect the legal system in Nigeria?
Well, the sincerity, the sincere truth in this particular matter, no, these are some of the challenges we have with this present administration in terms of the back and forth. And don't rule out the fact that most of these actions is tilted towards 2023 elections.
Yeah.
And we cannot rule that out, and the politics involved in it. Like you rightly said, it's a bad precedent for our nation, where within a space of how many months of assenting to a particular law, you go back to repeal the law. That means you didn't do your due diligence. You didn't actually consult properly before actually assenting to that particular law. The Electoral Act, he rejected the Electoral Act when it was sent to him because he felt that there are some provisions that he wasn't comfortable with that would be detrimental to Nigerians. And he sent it back to the National Assembly. Why didn't you do the same thing? And you discovered these things in the laws, and you still went ahead to sign it. To sign it, and you're saying you will go back to the National Assembly. You see, there are lots of fishy things in these whole processes, and that is why it becomes difficult for Nigerians to trust this whole call for subsidy removal. It is very difficult. The argument and the discussion of something we have been on for years now, and when they say they have partially deregulated or partially remove this subsidy, you see, Nigerians expect that this partial removal should reflect in their lives, and they should see the proceeds of the savings from these partial removals. But we don't see them. We don't see them. So that is why in some quarters, some persons believe that there's nothing like subsidy. Some persons believe that because the government has not been sincere over time. And this is another, this particular act is another impediment on the character of this current administration. Because you can't be going back and forth on these legal issues. Yes, we know they have control over the National Assembly. They are one and the same thing. But it's an unfortunate situation for democracy. It's an unfortunate situation for a nation like Nigeria that should actually have prospect. Don't also forget, this would also affect investors who want to invest into the Nigerian sector, into Nigeria. It will definitely affect them. Reason being that, they look at the legislations on ground. And it's on the strength of the legislation in each particular sector they get to invest. So, and when you look at this back and forth, that the government is not even sure of what it's doing at this, because that is what it seems. It's not even sure what it's doing.
So let me bring back Dr. Adamu. So, the fuel price affects everything in Nigeria, down to Gary Seller, down to every single bit. And so each time there's a fuel price increase, there's inflation. And with this, there's also been talk about potential hyperinflation. At some point, we need to get rid of subsidies. Everybody has agreed. But we all keep on saying at the right time, and the time isn't right. Talk to us about the targeted removal, which you started talking about earlier.
Yeah, the targeted subsidy should come after setting the conditions or fulfilling the conditions that will make Nigerian government eligible to remove the petroleum subsidy. So we for the moment, we'll be oblivious of the laws and look at what's good for Nigerians, looking at the poverty and low income population we have in Nigeria. Before we even implement the targeted subsidy, there are certain conditions. Number one, for any subsidy removal, there has to be sufficient refining capacities within Nigeria. We should not be importing refined petroleum. At the moment, we do what we call the crude oil swap. We give our crude oil and we bring in refined petroleum. And that's almost on a daily basis, we are losing $45 million. And 70% of our crude oil is not giving us dollars. So our foreign reserve is deteriorating because of that. So when you have local refining capacities, maybe Dangote refinery might help, even though Dangote refinery may not change the whole story. It does not mean the petrol is going to be cheaper. That's a very long story there. And we can still revamp and revive some of these dilapidated or old or outdated refineries. So that's the first condition. And this will help us to reduce the importation and reduce how much we pay for the imported petroleum products, which is the biggest bill in our import basket. And that will reduce the oversupply of Naira and appreciate the value of Naira. So we are fulfilling the second condition, which is exchange rate stability. And then for you to remove petroleum subsidy, you have to bring down the inflation rate to less than 10%. Because you cannot remove petroleum subsidy when you are already putting your inflation at 17%. But how many percent do you want to push it to when you remove the petroleum subsidy? You just rightly said everything is linked to the petrol price because of transportation. So now these are the conditions. Now let's assume the Nigerian government has fulfilled these conditions. It's not about 18 months. It's about these conditions. If in the next 3 months you can fulfill these conditions, then go ahead and remove the petroleum subsidy. If it is 1 million years to come, that until when you fulfill these conditions, that is when you should remove the petroleum subsidy. But even as at then, you have to take step by step to remove it, to phasing out. Number one, you have to checkmate and do the auditing of the liters we consume in Nigeria. They said 60, 70 million liters per day, which is not true. I think to me, on estimate, I would say conservatively we consume maybe 50 million liters in Nigeria. And I told you about the arbitrage that is happening in the neighboring countries from Nigeria. And when you do that kind of auditing, now you are taking the first steps to removing the subsidy so that you know how much you can afford that is genuinely for Nigerians. And then you go to number two, which is providing the mass transport system or the mass transport or public transport system, where not every Nigerian should have a car. So you are doing energy conservative policy where you're going to reduce energy per capita consumption in Nigeria. How much me and you we consume on daily basis should be reduced first, so that we reduce how much we consume. And that is when you go to the targeted subsidy. Under targeted subsidy, we have Nigerians who will apply to benefit from the petroleum subsidy. If you are already a rich guy, you don't have to apply. You don't have to apply. You don't have to apply to participate in the petroleum subsidy, right? People like us, as lecturers, we quickly go and sign up. But baristas, they have all the money.
Exactly, but it still affects all of us.
So what I'm saying is, people that want to participate and benefit, and largely is going to be the masses, the poor, they would subscribe to participate in the program. And then we have filling stations who will subscribe or affiliate to the petroleum subsidy. So if you're a filling station and you are providing the subsidized petrol, then you have to sell it at the regulated price. And then the people will come in. When they are doing the register, we take their biometric data and their vehicle data and put it in a database. We give you an electronic sticker. And when you come to the filling station, we verify that you are a Nigerian, you are this person, and it matches with their vehicle.
Ideally, this makes a lot of sense.
Anytime I start talking, cut me off, but I have to really finish this one.
Yes, okay, I'll let you finish.
So when you come to the filling station, we try to verify you are a true Nigerian that subscribe to this program. And then we give you maximum number or amount of liters you should consume, we should subsidize for you within that month. And then you see people, you see other filling stations that are not affiliating to the subsidy, discharging the fuel at a market price. So you see people will have to choose. Should I go to the filling station that is providing subsidy, or should I have the money enough to buy from the unsubsidized price? So more or less what you have is like the private or public filling stations. And then by doing that, you are already reducing the pressure, the burden of the subsidy you are paying, and you are narrowing down the subsidy to the people that truly need it, which are the poor.
I have a follow-up question for you based on this. I really like this, your recommendation. It's one of the brightest I've heard.
Yeah, because the idea is to reduce the burden for the first time, because there are some poor people that cannot just afford to be exposed to this high level of
so that's my question. I've read that just about a quarter of Nigeria consumes the bulk of the fuel which we consume.
Which they can afford the market price.
Yes, and those are the bigger cities. Abuja,
so what we are doing, we are eliminating those that don't deserve to benefit from the petroleum subsidy. How many rich people that they can fuel their cars with whatever price it is, but we are still benefiting from subsidy. What we are doing, we are eliminating those that they are not supposed to benefit from the petroleum subsidy, and then providing it to the people. That's why we call it targeted. We are targeting the poor. And then we make sure that we have all these filling stations that subscribe to the subsidy program across the country, especially in rural areas where we have the large majority are poor. And so that when you are doing that, you are now providing the protection and the cushion on the poor.
As opposed to giving them
that's
the
why
money.
I said this administration, when they say they're suspending the petroleum subsidy, they are just suspending it not because they are creating plans like this.
But for
they are doing that just to suspend the pressure or the punishment of Nigerians that they want to do because they want to use them for electoral purposes. So punishing Nigerians after using them for electoral votes by removing the subsidy after using them, winning the election, and then you try to remove the subsidy, to me, that's not fair. That's to me, I call it, in my article, I call it treason. So if you want to remove petroleum subsidy, remove it now.
Yeah.
But after 18 months, you're back to the square one. Nothing has changed. What you are doing is, you know that if you remove the petroleum subsidy today, people will be angry. They will not vote for your party. And you say, okay, let's delay it. So you are patronizing Nigerians.
So it's an emotional decision.
Which is not fair. Nigerians don't deserve that.
If you are removing subsidy
even by 18 months, you have to set these kind of conditions before you do that. It's not determined by the election period.
So barrister theory, I saw you agreeing and disagreeing and agreeing. So I'll let you give your feedback with closing thoughts. But before you tie that in, there's this conversation which we are not having about how the regulator shouldn't be a marketer. The regulator shouldn't be involved in the trade. And so you see the regulator, which let's say is the government, is involved in the pricing. They're involved in the marketing. And I hear, and this may be wrong, but it's alleged that even with the Dangote refineries, the NNPC has a board seat. Yeah. And so what does this do to the independence and the free control of the businesses? If we're talking privatization, if we're letting other people invest in it, how can we have any progress if the government still wants to have a say in what they do while still also participating in the marketing?
Now, unfortunately, we have a system where the government has a hand in almost everything. Even, recently the government bought about $2 point something billion equity in Dangote refinery. Yeah. And with that situation, you find out that we have a challenge with the government interfering in the business, the actual business itself, which is not supposed to be, in an ideal situation, is not supposed to be the case. Now, the government tried to make an artificial creation that seems like they are not part of the business by creating the NNPC company, the NNPC Limited. Yes. Now, that creation, it's just an artificial creation that is supposed to handle the business angle of the Nigerian government. But it is still the same thing we are saying, because if you look at the PIA and the creation of that NNPC Limited, you discover that the presidency has powers to appoint who, to remove who in the NNPC Limited. And when you look at this particular situation, it is bad for any economy. It is bad for any economy. When you have a private sector driven economy, you can create more jobs, you can have things work as they ought to go. Now, when we talk about the subsidy removal and the possibility having the local refineries with the Dangote refineries working and the possibility of prices being reduced, I doubt if we'll ever have price reduction. Reason why I doubt if we would ever have price reduction is because the government is still a part and parcel of the business. And the reason why the government wants to be in business is because the government also wants to control things in the private sector and still make profits. Don't rule out that fact. And not also rule out the fact that we believe that most of these in the private individuals also have their shares within Dangote, within these companies, and they must definitely politic the whole system to their favor. So at the end of the day, just like my brother said, Nigerians will still be the ones to bear the grunt. It drives us back to the same things we are complaining about. And that's why some of us have the view that this is just a mere increase in pump price and nothing more, because the situation remains the same. And I want to also state that there is no proper time for subsidy removal. There is no proper time. However, the suggestion that we should get local refineries running is also a brilliant one and a brilliant idea. Because if we have some of these local refineries running, like Dangote refinery is estimated to produce about 600 to 650 barrels, 1,000 barrels per day. And we have other, like the Port Harcourt refinery that is estimated to start up soon, and we're expecting that it will be up to like 60 or 70%, if these things are realistic. But we doubt if these things will be realistic because of the politics of, or the peculiarity of the Nigerian society, which is why we're saying that government Instead of getting yourself involved in this process, remove your hand from the business and allow the businessmen run the business. Government has no business in this particular sector, if not for regulatory purposes, because you determine the price. Having determined the price, you're still a businessman. You still have a stake in the business, right. And it becomes a problem. There is the fair play? There's no fair play in the entire sector.
Barrister Theory and Dr. Ademo, I think you've done so much justice to this in such a short time that anything else would ruin it. However, while we monitor the situation, we will bring both of you back to see the developments in this on this particular topic. But we really appreciate your time and presence joining us. This was extremely enlightening. I learned a lot, especially when you talk about the targeted subsidy. To our viewers at home, we continue the conversation on social media. You could follow The Weekend Show NG on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can also follow me, Andy Maduki, on all social media platforms. But that's the much we could take on today's episode of The Weekend Show. We'll be back next week, Saturday. But signing us out, we have Abraham the Priest to sign us out with some lovely music. Have a blessed week. Wash your hands and still wear your masks. Coronavirus is out there. You take care.
Sujada ganina nazo agareka duakariapo ganina nazo agareka imaka sujada. From the rising of the sun to the going down of the same, the name of the Lord be praised. Yeah, He's the lifter of my head, the joy and peace within, deliverer, mighty warrior. Yeah, Jesus, yeah, Jesus, yeah, Bone, yeah, Jesus, yeah, Jesus, oh, yeah, yeah, Jesus, oh, yeah. Ya bone nakawo ya Yesu jada de naka. Amazing grace is the sweetest sound.